What's up, y'all? It's Dev, and today was supposed to be Deck Tech Day, but I'm pushing it till tomorrow because I woke up this morning and Standard had changed on nearly every level more or less overnight. People brought the fire this weekend, not just to League, but to some big events. The Japan Standard Cup and a regional championship qualifier were this weekend, and everyone tried everything, and a lot of stuff actually ended up working. So this isn't quite a top 3 new decks of the week because I got like 6 or 7 decks I want to bring up just briefly today. Just talk about how beautiful Standard's looking and developing right now. But I do kind of feel like I owe you a top 3 new decks because the audio was so scuffed on the last top 3 decks. So let's just look at this as like a 2 top 3 new decks videos in a row, more or less. But yeah, Standard is really doing some stuff as of this morning and yesterday morning. And I wanted to point it out because in some ways it's glorious. Now we're going to start kind of small today with the second place deck from the Japan Standard Cup. This is a blue-black kind of bounce deck, a bit like Pixie, but it's also kind of an enchantment space deck. There's a lot of cool stuff going on here, and I guess it's spreading like wildfire because I've already played against it on Arena twice this morning. So you got Fear of Isolation, which is your Pixie in this deck. I apologize for any low-res images on this website. This is just the best website to do it on. It's Goldfish. Entity Tracker is also in here, though, because there's a lot of enchantments in the deck, so we should be drawing a lot of cards off of this, and it gives us a chance to play it like instant speed a little bit more, which the deck kind of wants to do. You know, you've got stuff like Boomerang Basics in here, which is a sorcery, but it's kind of another Pixie effect for us, but Pixie that draws a card, which is really good. I think some of the time you'd rather have the card than the body, right? But Boomerang Basics also doubles as kind of a tempo-y spell that we can't cast like on our opponent's turn, and half of the goodness of a bounce spell is being able to cast it when your opponent's attacking you or whatever. But Basics is still so good. It's just a single blue mana that we might as well play this as both a utilitarian piece for removal and tempo needs, but mostly for returning the Fear of Isolation to our hand so we get something else, or the Grim Bauble to our hand so we can replay it, or maybe the Nowhere to Run to our hand so we can replay it, right? So Tiny Bones joins up, which is, you know, kind of our Hopeless Nightmare variant in this deck right now. We can return the Storm Chaser's Talent to our hand in this deck, replay it again for a single blue, get another Otter. That's always good. Legend of Kuruk is one of our finishers in here. It comes into play and doesn't do much for a couple of turns. Scry 2, then draw a card, but then you exile it, and it comes back as this like 4/3 giant dude. Whenever you cast a spell, you get a 1/1 spirit token that can only be blocked by spirit creatures, but also it can only block spirits. You can also exhaust this guy, would have been 20 and take an extra turn after this one. I don't think you're too worried about that mode, but whenever you cast a spell, get a 1/1 is a heck of a finisher. So it's worth playing this card, especially when you're drawing cards off of Entity Tracker, and maybe you sometimes return it to your hand when you need more draws or something. So cool stuff here, man. Didn't think I'd see Legend of Kuruk in a deck anytime soon, but and now we see some kind of like Pixie deck that has moved from Orzhov into Dimir, and now it gets a card draw piece like Entity Tracker, gets Boomerang Basics out of the new set, which has proven to be a really important card in just the first week of the format, you know. And Legend of Kuruk, again, just didn't see that thing coming. You know, as far as the sideboard goes, it's pretty much everything you'd expect, and also Corpses of the Lost, which is often in the main deck of these best of 1 piles on Arena, but it's in the sideboard here. Just altogether really cool lists to kind of start this video off, and one that is not necessarily revolutionary, but it is one that we haven't seen yet. You know, usually the enchantment stacks are blue-white. Usually the return stuff, the bounce decks, right, are blue, or white-black in this current standard. So, you know, just need to see a new twist on these decks that looks really, really powerful. But next is, let's get a little bit more complicated with a brand new deck here. This is Bant Airbending Combo. It's labeled as here on Fish. But this is kind of an Appa, Badgermole Cub kind of deck. You know, so this took 5-0 in a standard league recently, but it also showed up, I think, in the top 5 of the Japan Standard tournament that we just covered, and it's showing up in other various places. It's showing up in a MTGO challenge as well in the top 8. So this deck is cleaning up, and it's kind of showing up in a bunch of different spots. In case you haven't seen this yet, the combo here is Doc Arlock, which is a 2-mana dude that allows us to cast spells from exile for 2 less. This bear's been hibernating for a while now. This guy's been sleeping since OTJ came out, but works really well with Appa, because when Appa comes into play, we can airbend any number of other non-land permanents that we control. And so to airbend stuff, it would usually cost 2 mana to replay it. But since we have Doc, we can just recast it like immediately. And what this ends up doing is getting a bunch of guys. We get so many dudes off of Appa because his last sign of text is whenever he casts a spell from exile, we get a 1/1 white ally creature token. So not only can we play the Appa and end up getting a ton of dudes for recasting our guys for free, but obviously we can get into the battlefield triggers again off of guys that recast. And if we have an Airbender Ascension in play, or if we just cast an Airbender Ascension, we can blink the Appa. And then when we blink the Appa, we get to, bring the Appa back into play and blink all of our other stuff and recast it for free. And then Appa gives us a bunch of guys again. So it's just a really, really cool, like, late game kind of plan for this deck to grind. But it happens surprisingly fast in this deck. We've got Bramble Familiar, Lana Elves, Gene Pollinator, which is showing up an awful lot. I was wondering how long it would take for Pollinator to kind of show up with Badgermole Cub. It didn't take very long. And then Badgermole Cub, of course, is in this deck too. So we make all of the mana in the world very explosive, and we use that mana to go like, Appa, replay all my guys, even if I don't have Dark Arlock out or whatever, get to Quantum Riddler really quickly, or in some cases, play a Nature's Rhythm. This card's shown up in 2 decks over the weekend. We're going to look at the next one next. But for now, in case you haven't seen this card in forever, this one's been sleeping since Dragonstorm. Search your library for a creature card, mana value X or less, put it on the battlefield, shuffle up. It costs X and 2 green to cast, or you can harmonize it for X and 4 green. So this, a lot of us content creators at the time when this card first came out said that if there's a combo deck that needs specific creatures on the board, this could end up seeing some play. Right, and that's kind of exactly what happened. Not only did we get the combo deck that needs 2 or 3 specific dudes on board, but that same combo deck produces enough mana to actually like reliably cast Nature's Rhythm. So, yeah, just a 2 of in this deck and a 4 of in the next deck we'll look at it in. So this card's really showing up this week. But yeah, neat little combo deck that mostly plays at instant speed after turn 2, right? You get your Lana Elves into your Badgermole Cub, and then you kind of chill because now you have an Aven Interrupter. You have 4 Aang Swift Savior in here to kind of protect you on turns 3 and 4, protect late game plays and stuff like that, mess with the opponent's tempo. That's always good. We can airbend, our own stuff if we want to, and sometimes we want to airbend the Appa, so that makes sense. And then Appa itself is also flash. So, between Aang and Aven Interrupter and Appa here, like most of our post-turn 2 plays, like after we get Badgermole down, most of those plays are at instant speed, which is really, really cool. But anyway, we've also got 4 Aang at the Crossroads. This dude's in everything. He's in 4 or 5 color allies as well. He's been in a kind of Bant mid-rangey deck that's shown up a couple of times this week, and now he's in the Bant combo deck. So, point to all of us who said, and I was one of them, just not tooting my own French horn here too much, but I really had some high hopes for this card, and it has exceeded even those expectations. Dude is showing up everywhere. You can say the same thing about Quantum Riddler. This is also a sleeper pick of mine when I was talking to Power Dragon when Edge of Eternities came out. And boy, I don't think I've ever been more right about a Magic card. But this should have been an easy one for a lot of us to see. Card is just absolutely wild. Apart from that, here's the sideboard. Authority of the Consoles, Get Lost, Aven Interrupter, fills out a place out of that card. Cody Scavenger. Interesting to have Cody Scavenger in the sideboard. Reclamation Sage, Tashauna Stiebinder, Biza, Quantum Riddler. I mean, a lot of these cards make plenty of sense. There's only 14 cards on the board. You can do that. But yeah, just a really neat deck that you're probably going to start seeing a lot more after this week because it's showing up everywhere in the last 4 days. And it's a really strong deck. But next is Golgari Combo, they call it. I had to stare at this deck for a minute before I even had any indication of what was going on. And I still might not entirely. So this is one that I'm going to ask you to correct me in the comments if I'm completely wrong about it. 7th place at the Japan Standard Cup. This is another Badgermole Cub deck. This is the card you're probably going to get sick of the fastest from Avatar. But, it's got the Gene Pollinator and Lana Elves package. Spider Manifestation is our 2-drop, dork in the deck. Seems like all of these Cub decks have another 2-drop dork in them, and you can really choose which one you want it to be. Bramble Familiar gets a lot of spots, but so does Tender Wild Guide. There's a few different ways you can use this slot, but we're casting a lot of big stuff in the deck, so it makes sense to want to untap Spider Manifestation, especially considering we untap it, tap it again, taps for more mana because we have a Badgermole Cub out, so really produces a ton of mana if we're doing it right. Dark Confidant, Bob, also shows up in this deck, but there's reasons for that. We'll get to it in a second. Really, the big reason is that it draws extra cards. That's good. but in any case, 4 Nature's Rhythm in this boy. 4 for the play set of Nature's Rhythm in this bad boy, and that's because you want Ouroboros on the table at all times. But I'm not sure exactly what else. Fawn's Bane Troll finally makes an appearance, another card that I was really high on back in the day. Hasn't done anything until just now. It's just a silver bullet. But when it enters, a monster roll token gets attached to a creature, or to it. And if you pay 1 and sacrifice an aura attached to Troll, then it fights a creature you don't control, and then exile the creature if it would die. Do this only at sorcery speed. So kind of a 5/5 trample 4 mana guy that also is removals. That seems great to me, you know. But it's just a one of, just a flex, I guess. You know, Overlord of the Balemerc is also in here to put cards into our yard so that we can lively dirge them out. Also, Dredger's Insight is in the deck, but Lively Dirge can, for a total of 4 mana, return up to 2 creature cards with total mana value 4 or less from your yard to the battlefield. We can also just use the first mode, which is search your library for any card, put it into your yard, shuffle. That costs 3 total mana. So for 5 mana, we can do the whole thing if we want to. But for the most part, I think what you're trying to do is, you know, either use the first mode to deposit Ouroboros in your yard, maybe, or an Overlord of the Balemerc or something. You know, no, it's not Overlord, but yeah, you either do that or maybe you want your Badgermole Cub so you can make a bunch of mana right now, and so you would just go get a Badgermole Cub, put it in your yard, you know, and then get it right back out, and suddenly, when the Cub is in play, you're more than paying, like you're netting mana off casting Lively Dirge. Right? Get the Cub out of your yard, throw it on the table, suddenly you can produce 12 mana. So that could work. And I think the one dimension that a lot of Ouroboros / Badgermole Cub decks are missing is a way to reestablish that board state once those threats are dealt with. Because, you know, everyone's got a target for Badgermole Cub. Everyone knows to destroy the Ouroboros if they can immediately when they see it. And this kind of, in some ways, takes those lines away from opponents. It plays fairly well against Jeskai Control, a big deck in the format. Plays fairly well against Dimir. And even the sort of blue-green, like the Simic Wan Shi Tong Badgermole Cub decks that play like It'll Quench and a bunch of other counterspells in the main deck. Something like Lively Dirge plays really well against those because it gives you an extra dimension once your plan is foiled the first time. Decks kind of grind a little bit in this format, so it makes sense to play this card both from a kind of combo perspective. I'm going to get, you know, 4 mana value worth of creatures into play as quickly as possible. And also from a utilitarian perspective, again, you know, like later on in the game, I can just get back an Ouroboros, or I can get back a Badgermole and a Dark Confidant, or a Badgermole and a Spider Manifestation, or something like that. So, I don't know. I think that's really cool. Works kind of well with Fawn's Bane Troll because, you know, Fawn's Bane fights something. If Fawn's Bane dies, you can get it back with a Lively Dirge. I kind of like that. So, Overlord of the Balemerc is in here to kind of put these cards in your yard in the first place for the Lively Dirge. So, I'm not sure what the overarching I'm going to win the game right this second combo is in this deck, but maybe I'm missing something. I think that for the most part, you're just like, okay, I have 1,000,000 mana. Ouroboros, Overlord of the Balemerc, get the creature back from my graveyard with Overlord's ability, play it, go to combat. Ouroboros makes everything enormous. Let's go. So I think that this is one of those I'm putting too much value on the table, like too quickly kind of decks. And it's interesting to see it go Golgari. As far as the sideboard, bossing safe or grind, duress because duress, insidious fungus. I mean, all of these make sense. Stab, Keynight Curator to mess around in yards, Karsi Revenant for against aggro, and Bifong's Bounty Hunters of all things. Good to see this card kind of bouncing around a little bit. I know I was low on it at the beginning of the season. That doesn't mean I don't want to see it succeed. You know, so this is good against sweepers and whatnot. Why not try it in the sideboard? Easy enough to cast in this deck with all the mana. But yeah, I don't want to spend too long in any one deck. But yeah, Golgari Tempo or Golgari Combo is a really weird looking one. Next is Azorius Tempo, the deck that we've kind of all been waiting for. This was 3rd place at the Japan Standard Cup here. This is the, you know, Avatar or Aang Swift Savior deck, really, that I think a lot of us expected would be a good deck in Standard. And it is, apparently. It's good enough to get 3rd place. And when you look at what the deck actually like has access to, you can see why it, you know, is destined to be successful. So Aang Swift Savior is obviously in here. There's a 3-up. But so is Aven Interrupter. This time is a 4-up. So we have 7 different 3-mana spells that can kind of counter or throw our opponent off tempo. And in the case of Swift Savior, this can also take stuff off the table rather than just off the stack. So that's important. Deshana's Tidebinder is in there. Another 3-drop, kind of rounds out the 3-drop slot. And, you know, counters activated abilities and triggered abilities, stuff like that. So that's pretty great. It's always been good. Enduring Curiosity. So you see some cards like Tidebinder and Curiosity and Spyglass Siren, Flood Pitch Drowners in here. They're all kind of ported over as we expected would happen. Ported over from the Dimir deck. but your cards have to be really good in order to, you know, cut the black from your deck and add white. So how are we kind of doing that? We've got Voice of Victory in here, which will stop the Jeskai control decks. And interestingly, the Dimir control decks, this might be your tempo decks at least. This might be the best reason, ironically, to go white in the deck. Because you can stop the Dimir decks more easily with a card like Voice of Victory. I think that's kind of cool. But just an all-around good card. Right? Get Lost is one fantastic removal spell. No More Lies is a fine counter. Avatar's Wrath shows up as a 2-of. We can keep one creature and then airbend all the other creatures, but our opponent can't reestablish board state on their next turn. They have to wait. So that's pretty cool. I think this could be a kind of way to win in a tempo-y kind of way. Keep your Enduring Curiosity out. Make sure you get in for some combat damage with that. That's 4. You hit him for 4 and draw a card. That could be great. Maybe keep your Tachana's Tidebinder or something. You know, like there's a lot of stuff you can do with Wrath in the deck. 3 Aang's Iceberg of all things. There's also in League today a blue-white control deck playing 2 Aang's Iceberg. So really weird to see this card show up. I didn't know that it would necessarily, but it turns out Banishing Light plus Flash is a pretty good proposition. And then Abandoned Air Temple is also in here in the lands. I just wanted to point this out. We are seeing these monocolored lands show up a good bit. So I'll point them out sometimes when we see them. As far as the sideboard goes, Ghost Vacuum, Seam Rip, Disdainful Stroke, Spider Sense, you know, a lot of the stuff you would expect to see. Enduring Innocence, Avatar's Wrath, and especially Clarion Conqueror. I'm building blue-white Momo. Blue-white flyers, basically, for the Patreon. They chose it on the Patreon poll. It's going to be our first deck tech of the season. Expect that sometime tomorrow, by the way. Sorry for pushing it a day, but Clarion Conqueror is in the board of that deck, and it is fantastic. I'm thinking about moving it into the main deck because it's really good against Cub. You see, activated abilities of artifacts, creatures, and planeswalkers can't be activated includes them tapping for mana abilities. So they can't tap elves, Gene Pollinator, the land they airbent, because it's a creature now. So this has been fantastic against specific matchups with Badgermole Cub, but, a lot of matchups include Badgermole Cub. So, just cool to see this instead of Dimir. Maybe we'll start getting sick of this one soon enough, but Dimir was in some ways knocked off its perch this weekend, and I'm really happy to see that. Next, and pretty quickly, I think, is this mono black mid-range deck that showed up to MTGO League today. It's got Cecil, Dark Knight, some of the stuff you'd expect, right? Deep Cavern Bat is in here, Bloodletter of Akhlazot, but no main deck Unstoppable Slasher. So that's kind of neat to see, right? You've got 4 Iridescent Vine Lasher in here, which is like one of my favorite cards, maybe of all time. I really do love Iridescent Vine Lasher. But you've also got a brand new card, Raven Eagle, which I'm not sure most people thought would show up at all. I didn't pay hardly any attention to this card in the preseason. Now I feel silly. Not to say that it's ruling standard or doing all the work, but it's here. 3 mana for a 2/3 flying bird assassin. Whenever it enters or attacks, exile up to 1 target card from a graveyard. If a creature card's exiled this way, you get a clue token. Whenever you draw your second card each turn, each opponent loses a life and you gain a life. So we're actually not drawing too many cards in this deck. I mean, we're getting clue tokens off of this. But this works kind of nicely with Unholy Annex, right? If we have a demon in play, then suddenly we're shooting for 3 a turn and we're gaining 3 as well. So that's kind of nice. And if we pop a clue from time to time, then we can deal even more damage with the Raven Eagle. So I can see why a 2/3 flyer is in the deck that kind of draws a card a little bit when it comes into play, messes around in yards against the Arden decks and a couple of other things in standard right now. So this kind of very interesting choice for a 3-drop in a standard with Preacher of Schism, Carsey, Revenant, a few different ways to use this slot. But Eagle showing up, and I respect that. It's one of the main reasons I wanted to point this deck out. Apart from that, the deck is mostly removal, right? Again, we've got Unholy Annex in here, and Realm of Ko shows up as well as a 4-of, because it's basically always going to come into play untapped, and it gives us this like late game grindy value of creating like more or less unblockable creatures. So that's pretty good too. So yeah, mono black midrange showing up with some cards you might not expect. There's the Unstoppable Slasher in the board, a full 4-of, 4 Duress, 4 Sunset Saboteur, 3 Timeline colors, so kind of transformational into a more aggro-centric deck, right? But altogether, a really neat build of this deck that you don't see too often anymore. Maybe that's why they had to transform it entirely, right? Next one, this deck is labeled Blue, Green, Black, but I wanted to point it out because it is one of the wildest decks of the week. This, too, is an MTGO League deck. Take that for what it's worth. But I think it's worth, a little bit here, this 5-0 today. And it is just another Badgermole Cub deck. This one has Lana Elves, 3 Molt Tinder instead of the Pollinator. Makes sense because we're doing graveyard stuff just a little bit. Ice Till Explorer. is in this deck. Sandman, Shifting Scoundrel, a one of. If we're going to be binning cards anyway, it's good to have this as a late game option. Disruptive Stormbrood shows up as it does in a lot of Golgari decks nowadays. Brand new card, Day of the Black Sun. I knew this would show up. I saw some other people pooping on it. I knew it was a bad idea. This is really good in a deck with all the mana available to it that like a Badgermole Cub deck has available to it. So cool to see this. But Esper Origins is also in the deck because we're doing graveyard stuff. It helps out with all that. Winter Night Stories draws a bunch of cards. Singularity Rupture, though, is the card that single-handedly made me want to bring this deck up. So we have 4 Day of Black Sun and 2 Singularity Rupture and 19 creatures. 7 of them ones that tap for mana. So what? Yeah, basically I think this deck is trying to cast Singularity Rupture as quickly as possible. Which is a really neat thing to be wanting to do in your Magic the Gathering deck. Just throw that out there. But, you know, Esper Origins, if we mill ourselves, right, Esper Origins, we can sometimes play that like the next turn after a Cub or something. And suddenly we can play like 2 of them out of our yard. And maybe that's a thing, right? We can play the Sandman out of our yard at that point if we've milled ourselves. And maybe it's huge, you know, Ice Till Explorer on the next turn. And now we can play a bunch of lands out of our yard. There's a lot of things that we could potentially do with the Singularity Rupture targeting ourselves. I'm a little interested that this deck does not play Season of Loss. We have seen these kind of Sultai-ish decks over the last couple of seasons playing a large number of creatures, all of which will mill somehow, or most of which will mill somehow. This deck is conspicuously missing some of those, right? Like Overlord of the Belmerk or Town Greeter, right? We're not doing necessarily all of that, but, you know, usually we'd see Season of Loss as kind of the top end, you know, buckshot, you know, kill at the end of the day. But this deck eschews all of that, but still runs Singularity Rupture to potentially mill ourselves a bunch, or you know, hit our opponent for a bunch of cards if things have to grind like that. Just really interesting deck the way they built it here. But you know, we've also got Restless Reef in here, so that's kind of a kill with the Singularity Rupture, right? Just Singularity Rupture him once or twice and then hit him with a couple of Restless Reef attacks, you win the game. But sideboard wise, a pretty big spread of options. Ghost Vacuum, Soul Guide Lanterns against the you know, graveyard deck. Same with Keen-Eyed Curator. Moreland, Devourer of Spiders. I want to do this so bad. The Badgermole Cub package with Moreland. I want it. Spider Senses in here to counter stuff. Another copy of Sandman to grind. Scrap Shooter against artifacts and enchantments. Surak, Elusive Hunter against decks with a bunch of removal. Deshotta's Timebiter against those things. A 4th Disruptive Stormbrood and a Season of Loss as a one of to honor the original deck, I assume. But anyway, yeah, man, altogether, really neat way to build a kind of Sultai combo deck. We see a lot of different Badgermole builds this week, but again, that's not all. You know, these were the sort of results of the regional championship qualifier. Dimir midrange is here. Azorius Control is here. Is It Prowess is here, a deck that's popped up a few times. Same with Mono Red, but Boros aggro, Temur aggro with Battle Crier. Dimir midrange, a slightly different deck. Orzhov Control, which is everything it seems like. You know, it's just a bunch of removal in like Ugin. Plus 2 different combo decks to round out the top 10 decks of this event here. Just a wild weekend for Magic the Gathering, dude. Like, Standard really flipped on its head overnight. And even though this, you know, particular event has Dimir and Azorius on top, we didn't see as much Dimir at all, as much Jeskai Control, as much of this Is It Prowess deck, as much Mono Red, nowhere near as much. And it seems like both the combination of the bans and Avatar having real playable cards in it has, you know, kind of turned Standard around a little bit, made it a little bit more exciting. You know, it's been a few seasons since we've been able to get like 8-10 new decks all in 1 week since a set came out. So hopefully things keep rolling this way. And even if they don't, Avatar has given us a ton of new decks to kind of pour over and look through. So crazy day today. Hope you enjoyed this. If you got any other new decks you saw out there in the wild or are doing well in results, hit me up with them in the combat. I've done that twice, being a Magic player. Hit me up in the comments section. Do all the YouTube stuff on your way out. Like the video, subscribe, do blah, blah, blah. I don't want the video to get overly long. But there was just so much to talk about. So much to talk about, dude. That Bant combo deck looks crazy. I want to mess around with that. So just good stuff this week. And I will join you again tomorrow. Don't worry. Deck Tech coming very soon. I promise you. But anyway, y'all, just... can't even organize my thoughts. There's too much to go over. But yeah, I will see y'all again very, very soon. I am Deb from The Place. Thanks for watching, Wizards. Spread love and be kind.